Welcome to the Armani Talks YouTube channel. I'm your host, Armani Talks. In this channel, I'm covering communication skills in order to help you improve your way with words. In this episode, I'm going to be sharing with you a social superpower, which is going to put you way ahead of your peers. You are going to join the 3% Club, the club who is very much aware of the superpower, not in an ambiguous sense, but in a very systematic process. This is the ability to introduce yourself. I didn't quite understand the power of the superpower until my early 20s. Yes, before then, I did introduce myself to other people, but there was a particular moment from my early 20s when the process of self-introduction took up a brand new light, when money was involved. In my early 20s, I was working in a company called Zingo. And this is before Uber and Lyft, where Zingo was the kingpin in Tampa. Zingo was pretty much Uber for drunk people. And this company was predominantly known for their drivers riding this very tiny little scooter. So here's how Zingo would work. Let's imagine your name is Michelle and you just got a promotion. So you take your car to Applebee's and you start drinking a lot of sour amarettos, a lot of alcohol. As some time goes on by, you start to understand that you're drunk. You can't drive your car back home. So this is when you call Zingo, and a Zingo driver will come to you in their tiny little scooter, fold that tiny little scooter in your back trunk, and then will drive your car from Applebee's back to your place. And then they will grab their tiny little scooter and go back to Zingo home base. The difference between this company and Uber is that next day, you as Michelle, you got your car back. You don't got to call another Uber back and forth. Now you get the business model. The manager of this company was named Greg. I worked in the company, and there was another guy named Terry. Terry and I, we weren't necessarily competitive, but competition naturally just sprung up because at the end of each ride, tips were given. And at the end of every shift, Greg, Terry, and I, we would combine all the tips that we got for the day. Then we would divide it into 3. Greg was a fair man. Time and time again, I came to see that Terry was blowing me away in terms of tips. Not just by a little bit, but by a lot. I would bring in $5 tips to the table. Terry would bring in $50 all the way to $100. And just for a little bit of context, Zingo was predominantly targeting wealthy, affluent individuals in the Tampa Bay area. Greg was very strategic about not targeting college students because he didn't want Zingo to be a service that frat boys and sorority girls used in order to just get drunk and drive around. So Greg was smart. The people he was targeting were wealthy individuals. Me bringing in $5 tips was asinine. Eventually, I had to ask Terry what he was doing. I go up to Terry one day. I'm like, yo, man, what are you doing? We're often getting very similar rides in the same neighborhood. How are you making way more tips than me? And he gives a very bland response. I don't know, man. Bro, you gotta know something. I'm getting $5, you're getting $100. What's the deal? Come on, tell me about your writing process. Now he's brainstorming. He's like, they get in the car. I get in the car. I ask them how their night is going. Wait. Do you ask them how their night is going? Or do they ask you how your night is going? Terry just seamlessly says, I ask first. I respond back with, you always ask first? Terry responds back with, always. This was the biggest difference between Terry and myself. I used to wait for these drivers to ask me how my night is going so I could start up conversation, while Terry was being the first to initiate the conversation. Now, younger me for a while thought, who cares? I mean, at the end of the day, we're still striking up conversation. It just so happens that Terry was more active with it and I was more passive with it. No way can the opportunities be that different. Could it? It could. Because since Greg was targeting a set amount of people, we had a lot of repeating customers. And routinely, I would see that Terry and we would drive the same folks around throughout the week. And Terry would get way more tips with the same exact customers. This was no coincidence. So I started to realize that Terry had the superpower of breaking the ice first. He was the one initiating conversation, and that changed up the entire dynamic. That was the first lesson that I learned from Terry. The second lesson that I learned was that, I gotta try this out. Let's see how much of a difference this makes. So one day I end up driving this nice Maserati, and it just so happens that the person that I'm driving was involved in the company Invisalign. This is basically braces, but the invisible ones, so you can't see it. It doesn't make you look ugly or anything. This guy was rich. I picked him up from a mansion, and I'm driving his car, and I was the first to ask him, "Oh, how was the party?" We started talking, we started engaging with one another, and I started to notice that for me at the time, my younger 20-year-old self, I had some roadblocks in terms of conversation skills, especially small talk with this completely random stranger. But you know how the car goes. The car goes over the speed bumps, as long as it is not a roadblock. And that's what consistently kept happening. As I started to pick up more and more people and started to start the conversation with each one of these people, I started to notice that the tension that I initially felt was starting to reduce, and my reaction rate to the variety of topics being discussed among the different passengers was increasing and increasing. The second lesson that Terry accidentally showed me was that conversation skills, the ability to introduce yourself and adjust your conversation based off of the person that you're speaking with, is a muscle. This was mind-blowing for me because for a long time, I predominantly viewed conversation skills through the lens of an artist. You know how artists are. They're very fancy. There's a lot of elegance. There's a lot of beauty. But the more and more that I did the conversation skills, and the more that I spoke to random strangers first, the more that I transitioned my mentality from viewing conversation as an artist to an athlete. An athlete views life in a very different way. They view things as trainable or not trainable. Is this a muscle that I can work out and improve or not? If it's not a muscle that I can improve, then let me focus on what I can improve. To a top tier athlete, everything is a muscle. So the more that I started to start conversation with random people in Zingo, not only did the money go up, where my tips were doubling, tripling, quadrupling at times, but also I was able to notice firsthand that soft skills is very nicely viewed as an athlete. View everything as a muscle, especially when you're introducing yourself to strangers. Because if you're like, listen, man, me introducing myself to strangers is not easy for me. It's actually very, very uncomfortable. You gotta realize, it was the same exact way for me. And the more that I spoke to Terry, the same exact situation happened with him. But luckily for him and my younger self, we were both able to view it more as an athlete rather than strictly an artist. And by viewing it as an athlete in the beginning stages, soon small talk, conversation skills, breaking the ice is now viewed as an art form. But start off nitty gritty and be the athlete mindset first. So the moral of the story is that the superpower that I wanted to bring up in this video is that the power to introduce yourself first is what separates 97% from the 3%. There's 3% of people that not only introduce themselves first, but they view it in a very systematic process and they are able to understand the practical benefits of it. I was in the 97% of the people who didn't first understand the benefits of it. And then when I did understand the benefits, I wasn't able to quite quantify it. But I joined the 3% when I was capable of quantifying it with numbers. We leverage what we see practical value in. So if you're currently someone that's struggling with, oh, well, I don't want to start a conversation with a stranger, you got to slowly introduce the practical value that can yield from introducing yourself over time. And once you introduce yourself, the first few interactions are going to be bumpy. There's going to be a whole bunch of speed bumps, a whole bunch of potential roadblocks, but you just got to keep going. Keep on viewing it like an athlete. And just like a top tier athlete knows, everything is a muscle which can be worked out. The same concept applies for conversation skills as well. Be like the Terry, the person that was stacking up more and more tips, and then shared this knowledge with the younger Armanis of the world. If you enjoyed today's story and you want more short stories like this, be sure to check out my new book, Wordplay, 101 Short Stories to Improve Your Communication Skills. In this book, you are going to get a brand new experience in terms of reading a book. Currently, in this era that we're living in, we're busier than ever. The most productive of people are having trouble reading a book from front to finish. The beauty regarding wordplay is that each of the 101 short stories are completely disconnected from one another. So you could start one story, hop around a few chapters, start another one without the fear of thinking that you missed something in the chapter before. It's a very revolutionary book that is going to hit communication skills from multiple different angles. So you get a machine gun filled with insights piercing your mind in real time. To grab a copy, check out the link in the description box or the pinned comment right on below. Grab your copy. If you enjoy it, be sure to leave a review. Thank you for joining the Armani Talks YouTube channel, and I will catch you on the next episode.